Welcome to Tabitha Revenge Stories, where every twist keeps you on the edge of your seat. If you love thrilling revenge tales, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, so you never miss a new story. I sat frozen in the back of the conference room as my sister stood in front of 20 investors, her voice steady and confident, presenting my business idea. Word for word. The exact phrases I'd written in my private notes. The specific language I'd used only once, when I trusted her. "I built this from scratch," she said, smiling at the room. "It took me months of research and testing. The core system is completely original." The investors leaned forward, interested. Some were taking notes. One was already nodding like she was watching something brilliant happen. I felt my heart pound against my ribs. Not from anger yet. From the simple shock of watching someone take something that belonged to you and present it to the world like it was theirs. My sister, Meredith, clicked to the next slide. It was her mock-up of my system. The design was good. Solid. But something was missing. I could see the gap immediately. The core component that actually made everything work. She hadn't included it. Maybe she'd forgotten. Maybe she'd never really understood what made the idea powerful. The investors applauded. Meredith bowed slightly, accepting their praise like she'd earned it. And I sat there, watching her steal my future while everyone around me celebrated her honesty. I left during the applause. Not dramatically. I just stood up quietly and walked out of the conference room, closing the door softly behind me. My hands were shaking but my face was calm. I'd learned a long time ago that showing emotion just gives people power over you. I sat in my car in the parking garage for 30 minutes without moving. I kept replaying the moment. Her voice. The exact wording I'd written. The way the investors had believed her. The worst part was that I'd shared that idea only with her. Only once. 3 months ago, sitting in her apartment, excited about a new business direction. I'd told her because she was my sister. Because I thought she cared about me. Because family was supposed to be safe. I'd been wrong. I whispered to myself in the darkness of my car, "She doesn't even know what she took." That was the important part. The thing that kept me calm. Meredith had taken the surface idea. The visible version. But the actual system that made it work, the deep technical framework that solved the real problem, I'd never told her about that. She'd stolen 90% of the idea. But she'd left behind the 10% that mattered most. And she didn't even realize it. I took myself back through the memory of that conversation 3 months ago. Sitting on her couch, coffee growing cold between us, me explaining the concept. I'd told her the general framework. The market opportunity. The revenue model. All the parts that sounded good in a pitch. But the actual system, the proprietary algorithm that made it different from every other solution already out there, I'd only started building that after our conversation. I'd never mentioned it to her. She didn't know it existed. The investors would start testing her prototype. They'd quickly discover that it had the same flaws as every competing product already on the market. They'd realize that while the idea was interesting, the execution was incomplete. They'd figure out that something crucial was missing. I decided right then, sitting in my cold car in a dark garage, that I wasn't going to tell her what it was. I wasn't going to expose her. Not yet. Not for a while. Let her build on the incomplete version. Let the investors realize, on their own, that her system didn't work. Let her experience the slow failure that came from stolen ideas that had missing pieces. The praise for Meredith started immediately. My parents posted about it on social media. Photos of her at the pitch. Stories about their brilliant daughter launching her business. They barely mentioned me. That part didn't hurt as much as I expected. I'd stopped wanting my parents' approval years ago. But watching Meredith paint herself as the sole creator while simultaneously painting me as supportive but uninvolved, that took real skill. She posted on Instagram, "Grateful to everyone who believed in me. This journey has been mine alone, but I'm grateful for the support of people who simply cheered me on." The comment section was full of congratulations. People saying how impressed they were. How inspiring. How bold. And there, in the middle of it, was the implication that I'd done nothing. That I'd only cheered. That the work, the thinking, the breakthrough, that was all her. I screenshot everything. Her posts. The investor presentation slides. The comments. The articles that started appearing online calling her a bold young entrepreneur. The news segment about her startup. I saved them all methodically, in order, with timestamps. I was building a timeline. Documentation. Proof. I still didn't know what I was going to do with it. But I knew I'd need it. Over the next 3 months, Meredith's business gained traction. Real traction. An angel investor wrote a check. A tech blog wrote a feature. A podcast wanted her as a guest. She was building momentum. Building credibility. Building a future on the foundation of my idea. And with every milestone, I watched for the cracks. They started small. User reviews began mentioning that the system was clunky. That it didn't do everything it was supposed to do. That compared to other solutions on the market, it was missing something fundamental. Meredith responded to the criticism by saying they were still in beta. That features were being added. That they'd address concerns in the next update. But the cracks were widening. The missing piece, the actual system that made the whole thing work, was becoming more obvious every day. She was failing in exactly the way I'd predicted. Not because she didn't understand marketing or funding or pitching, but because she didn't understand the core technology. She didn't understand the part of the idea that was actually revolutionary. She only understood the pretty surface. And the surface, without the substance underneath, wasn't going to be enough. I started building my own version. Better. Refined. Complete. I worked nights and weekends. I documented everything as I went. Every draft. Every prototype. Every version. I created a legal timeline that couldn't be disputed. I filed provisional patents. I registered the work with my name and timestamp. This time, I wasn't going to be vulnerable. This time, I was going to build something that was irrefutably mine. The difference was immediate. My version solved the problems that Meredith's version had. It addressed the market gaps. It did what the incomplete idea couldn't do. I wasn't trying to prove anything yet. I was just building. Creating. Making something real. And then, one afternoon, my email pinged with a message from someone unexpected. His name was Marcus. He'd been one of the investors at Meredith's pitch. He was reaching out to me privately. I attended your sister's presentation a few months ago, his email read. I have some questions about inconsistencies I noticed. Are you available to talk? I stared at the email for 20 minutes before responding. I didn't confirm anything. I didn't accuse. I didn't offer information. I just replied, sure. Let's talk. We met for coffee the next day. Marcus was older, maybe 50, with the kind of calm that comes from having seen a lot of startup failures. The pitch was solid, he said, stirring his coffee. But something felt off. The idea is good, but the execution is missing something. Like there's a gap in the logic. I nodded. I didn't say anything. I've seen this before, he continued. Ideas that look impressive but don't actually work when you dig into them. Usually means someone didn't fully think it through. Or, he paused. Someone didn't own the full idea they were presenting. He was fishing. Giving me a chance to confirm what he suspected. I just listened. 6 months after Meredith's pitch, her company hit its first major crisis. User complaints exploded. The system was crashing under light load. Features weren't working. The functionality everyone had been promised simply didn't exist. Meredith responded publicly by blaming technical delays. She said they were scaling too fast. She said the infrastructure couldn't handle the demand. But I knew the real truth. The system was failing because it was incomplete. Because the missing piece, the core algorithm that made everything work, had never been built. She was trying to band-aid a broken foundation with technical excuses. The investors were getting nervous. Marcus emailed me again. Your sister's company is crashing. Do you know anything about why? I didn't respond immediately. I was waiting for something. The media started asking questions. Tech blogs that had praised her startup suddenly started questioning her competence. Articles appeared with headlines like "Early success becomes early failure" and "The problem with moving too fast." Meredith was scrambling publicly. She was doing interviews trying to spin the failures as learning experiences. She was talking about pivoting the product. She was making promises about upcoming features that would solve the problems. But she was also getting desperate. I could see it in every statement. She was trying to manage a failure she didn't actually understand the cause of. The girl who'd stolen my idea was now watching that idea collapse because she'd never truly owned it. She'd taken the presentation version but not the substance. The marketing but not the mechanics. And with every day that passed, more people were realizing the same thing. Then she called me. At 10 o'clock at night, her voice tight with the kind of panic she was trying to hide. "Nina," she said. "I need your help. Professionally." The irony was so complete it almost made me laugh. She was calling to ask for advice from the person whose idea she'd stolen. What kind of help? I asked carefully. "The system is having technical issues," she said. "And I don't have someone who really understands the core architecture. I thought maybe you could look at it. Unofficially. As a sister. Help me figure out what's wrong." She still wasn't admitting what had happened. She was just pretending nothing was stolen. Pretending we were colleagues helping each other. "Okay," I said. "I'll help you." "Really?" Relief flooded her voice. "Yes," I said. "But I have a condition." "What condition?" I smiled into the phone. We can talk about it when we meet. We met at a coffee shop near her office. Meredith looked exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes. Stress showing in the way she held her shoulders. I need you to formally acknowledge my contribution, I said. Not as a request. As a statement. She stared at me. What do you mean? She asked carefully. I mean, I said calmly, that you're going to tell your investors that the foundational idea came from me. That you presented my concept without my permission or acknowledgement. That I deserve credit. Her face went hard. No. Absolutely not. Okay, I said. I stood up. Nina, wait. No, I said. That's my condition. That's what I need in exchange for helping. Public acknowledgement. Not just in private. In public. I can't do that, she said. That would destroy everything. My investors would. Your investors would know the truth, I said. That's the idea. To finally know the truth. I smiled. Not unkindly. Just honestly. So no, I said. I can't help you. I won't help you. Not unless you're willing to be honest about where that idea came from. I left her sitting there with her cold coffee. She didn't follow me. A week later, I was invited to pitch to a different group of investors. Different firm. Different people. Though I noticed that Marcus had connections to both groups. I prepared something completely new. Not the stolen idea. Something different. Something that had evolved from the original concept but had taken a completely different direction. I wasn't going to pitch the same idea that had already been presented to the world. I was going to show what the idea could become when it was actually understood. When it was actually built right. I walked into that pitch room and presented something that was technically superior to anything Meredith had shown. But more importantly, I presented it with full understanding. I could answer every question. I could explain every choice. I could defend every decision because I'd made all of them. I didn't mention Meredith. I didn't mention the stolen idea. I just presented the evolved version. The complete version. The version that solved every flaw anyone had publicly seen in the broken version that was failing. The investors were visibly impressed. One asked me about the gap in the current market solution. I explained, in technical detail, why existing products failed. And then I showed exactly how my approach solved those problems. By the end of the pitch, I had multiple offers. Word spread quietly through the startup world. There's another version of this idea. And it's better. Articles started appearing that didn't mention Meredith by name but clearly referenced her failure. Why the first version failed and what the market actually needs and the technology behind the breakthrough. People started connecting dots. They started realizing that Meredith's version had been incomplete. That someone else understood the market better. That there was another player in the space who actually knew what she was doing. It took exactly 2 weeks for Meredith to hear about it. She called me again. This time furious. "You're copying me," she said. Her voice was shaking with anger. "You're trying to steal credit for my success." I laughed. Actually laughed. "Am I?" I asked calmly. "Yes. Everyone's talking about your company now. Comparing it to mine. Making mine look worse. This is sabotage." "Meredith," I said. "Are you sure about that? Are you really sure that's what's happening here?" Silence. Because from where I'm sitting, I continued, it looks like someone finally built the idea the right way. And people are noticing the difference. I reviewed my documentation carefully. The timeline was perfect. I had dated drafts of my original concept. Emails to my sister sharing the initial idea. My developed version from after our conversation, with clear timestamps showing when I'd built the missing piece. Provisional patent filings in my name from before Meredith's pitch. News articles about her pitch, with the date showing it was after I'd already created my improved version. I had undeniable proof. But I still didn't release it. I was waiting for something. Some moment that would make it clear. Some point where silence would be worse than speaking. Meredith's company hit a breaking point 3 months later. A major system failure. The core infrastructure, the part that was supposed to hold everything together, collapsed completely. Investors demanded answers. The media demanded answers. Users demanded answers. And Meredith didn't have them. She'd built her entire company on stolen scaffolding. The moment that scaffolding showed its structural weakness, the whole thing fell apart. She tried one last play. She went public with a story. An interview with a major tech publication where she talked about sabotage from close friends and betrayal within the industry. She didn't name me. But she hinted. Enough that everyone knew who she meant. There are people, she said in the article, who will try to tear you down out of jealousy. Who will claim your success isn't real because they want it to be theirs. I've had to deal with that. And it's been heartbreaking. She was trying to reframe her failure as being caused by someone else. By me. By my success being theft rather than creation. The narrative was starting to shift again. Some people were starting to believe her. Starting to think that maybe I had stolen from her. That my success was built on undermining hers. I realized then that silence had an expiration date. I was invited to speak at a major industry conference. A panel about startup innovation. And Meredith was invited to speak too. Same stage. Same time slot. Different panel segments. The conference organizers wanted the drama. They wanted us to appear together. They wanted to see what would happen. I accepted immediately. 2 days before the event, Meredith called me. One last time. Don't do this, she said. Her voice had shifted. Now it was almost pleading. Whatever you're planning, just don't. Let me keep my reputation. Let me save this. I'm not planning anything, I said. I'm just going to tell the truth. The truth is complicated, she said. No, I said. The truth is simple. You'll know it when you hear it. You should go first, I told her. I insist. Go first and tell your story. Get it all out. Let everyone hear your version. She didn't answer. On stage, under bright lights, with hundreds of people watching and streaming online, Meredith told her story. Her version. The complete narrative of her startup journey. She talked about the long hours. The research. The breakthrough moment when the idea came to her. She talked about building from scratch. She talked about the challenges and the growth. She told it confidently. She told it like she believed it. She told it like it was undeniably true. The audience applauded. People were moved. Some were inspired. And then I walked onto the stage. I didn't attack. I started telling a story. A different story. A story about sitting on my sister's couch 3 months before her pitch. About sharing an idea. About trust. I told the story calmly. Clearly. The room grew quiet. And then, I said, I watched her present that idea to investors. Word for word. With my phrases. With my language. With no acknowledgement that it came from me. I could see Meredith's face harden. She was trying to think of a response. But here's the thing, I continued. I had left out the most important part. The actual system that makes it work. I never told her that because I hadn't finished building it yet. I pulled out my laptop. I showed the timeline. I showed the dates. I showed the drafts. I showed the patents filed in my name months before her pitch. I showed the evolved version. The complete version. The one that actually worked. This is what an idea looks like when it's built with full understanding, I said. When someone actually owns it. When someone comprehends every piece, not just the surface. The room was completely silent. She took 90% of the idea, I said. The visible part. The presentation. But she left behind the 10% that actually made it revolutionary. I looked at Meredith. You didn't just take my idea. You took the version you could understand. I kept the part that made it work. The reaction was immediate. The audience understood what had happened. The investors in the room started making calls. The media started typing. The narrative shifted in real time. This wasn't about business failure anymore. This was about theft and broken trust. Investors confronted Meredith immediately after I left the stage. Not angrily. Just factually. They wanted to know why she hadn't acknowledged the source of her idea. They wanted to know what she'd been thinking. She tried to defend herself. She tried to reframe. She tried to claim that my version was just an evolution of her work. But the timeline was too clear. The patents were too documented. The dates didn't lie. One investor said simply, "You presented someone else's idea as your own. That's not innovation. That's fraud." The deals fell apart. In real time. Right there in the conference room, as people read through the documents I'd presented, the investment commitments dissolved. Meredith looked at me from across the room. She looked stunned. Like she couldn't quite believe that truth had weight. That it actually mattered. I didn't humiliate her further. I didn't do interviews. I didn't post about it. I didn't drag out her failure for public consumption. I simply stated the truth and walked away. The media did the rest. The articles wrote themselves. The story spread. The industry responded. Within a week, Meredith's company was gone. Investors pulled out. Employees found new jobs. The press moved on to the next scandal. And Meredith had to live with what she'd done. Had to live with a career built on theft that had been publicly dismantled. I got calls from venture capitalists. From Fortune 500 companies. From people who wanted to invest in my company. Who wanted to partner with me. Who wanted to hire me. My phone didn't stop ringing. But the first thing I did was talk to Marcus, the investor who'd suspected something was wrong from the beginning. "You knew," I said. "I suspected," he said. "But I wanted to see what you'd do. Whether you'd go for immediate revenge or whether you'd actually build something. I built something, I said. I know, he said. And that's why I'm investing. I signed the deal with Marcus and 3 other investors 2 weeks later. My company launched officially 6 months after the conference. And it was exactly what the market needed. Not because I was brilliant, but because I actually understood the problem. Because I'd built something complete. Because I'd owned every piece of it. The funny thing about standing on the truth is that it doesn't require you to yell. It doesn't require performance or drama or humiliation. Standing on the truth, you just have to be honest. You didn't just take my idea, I said one last time in an interview, months later. You took the version you could understand. I kept the part that made it work. The journalist smiled. Everyone understood what that meant. My sister had stolen a skeleton and wondered why it didn't dance. I had built the living thing that could. And in the end, that was all that mattered. The truth found its way to light, not through anger, but through evidence. Not through cruelty, but through clarity. And sometimes, the best revenge is simply succeeding anyway. If this story made you feel something, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I would love to see you in the next one.